Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kathy G podcast. This is all about women lawyers making a difference. And the overall mission of my podcast is for us to really realize that we are great as human beings and as lawyers and as women. And most importantly, we can be even greater and bring that greatness of ours to the world through our humanity, through our brand, through our presence, and through having some fun in life. There's no reason that we can't have fun and be lawyers and learn from one another. I do this podcast for two reasons. One, I truly care about our humanity deeply and want us all to see how great we are as humans, as women, and lawyers to be happier and healthier. And the second reason that I do it is I learn from my guests so much, and I struggle with my own feelings of being lonely, less than, just like everyone else. And some days are good and some days are ugly. But today's a good day because this podcast is something you guys are going to really, really enjoy. I've got as my guest Heidi Alexander. And Heidi is the director of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Standing Committee on Lawyer Well-Being. That's a mouthful. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Heidi, you are very well known in the well-being space, in my opinion, anyway. You are going to be incoming president of the Institute for Well-Being in the Law. So, congratulations. And you are one busy woman. And I have known you for a long, long time through the ABA Law Practice Division. So when I think of you, I think of one woman who is out there on a mission doing a lot of things, including being a mom and all sorts of stuff. So I want to turn it over to you to share with us your story and how you got to where you are and what ignites this passion about well-being in you.
Wow, that's a great question to begin with. It's a big one. And I, I appreciate it because I think, you also learn something about me and sort of what brings me to this work. So I, I was always interested in mostly public service and sort of helping others. And I'm going to just go way, way back in my life because there is a moment in time that I have that sort of seared in my memory as something that really impacted my trajectory. I don't think I knew it at the time, but I know it now. And I grew up in Minnesota, and in Minnesota, everyone plays hockey. Everyone skates, everyone plays hockey. And I did when I was a young girl, and I would go out to the rinks outside and I would skate with the boys, and I had a wonderful time, and it was my passion, playing hockey. And I used to say to my parents, I want to play with the boys. There were barely any girls teams at this point. And my parents said, no, you're not playing with the boys. It's not going to be safe. You're going to get hurt. And I kept saying, I want to play. I love this sport. And so finally they found me a place to play with some other girls. There was one community that had a team. And then from there, my parents helped me to advocate for the first girls' high school hockey team in the town that I lived in. And at that point, there were maybe only a handful of girls' ice hockey teams throughout the state. Most of the women would play what's called ringette because they didn't let people at ringette where you actually it's a ring. It's actually a ring, and you have to get the ring into the net. So they could do that, but they couldn't play hockey. And so you had some women who were these girls who were fantastic skaters, but they just weren't allowed to play hockey. And I have memories of that experience, trying to advocate for the creation of this girls' varsity hockey team. One of those experiences was sitting in I think it was an auditorium. And I remember this vividly. I was in seventh grade, sitting in this auditorium in front of the school board, and we all the girls who wanted to play got up and gave testimony and said, I want to play, I'm passionate, I'm competitive, I love this sport, and we gave this testimony. And then there were some people who came up there and said, girls are just not competitive, they're not interested, they don't really want to play, no one wants to watch them play. And the vote was 4-3 to create this girls' varsity hockey team. And to me, that experience, it showed me a lot about sort of the challenges that people need to overcome throughout life, and sort of gave me that experience at a really young age. And from there, I became this advocate. I mean, we had this school newspaper, and there were people who would write things like girls shouldn't, want to play. And then I would write an article in response. One of my articles was published by USA Hockey, and then from there, that actually led me to undergrad. So it was really through my hockey experience that I was able to get to a really great school, to play hockey, to then from that, really get into advocacy for other people. And I think a lot of that is really based on, again, like this experience that I had. And so I went through college saying, how can I help other people? How can I help other people who are disadvantaged, and need people to advocate for them? And so I was set on working at a nonprofit organization after college. And I worked at a couple of organizations, sort of helping women start businesses was one of them. And then from there realized, well, it would be great to have a law degree, because then, I could take this advocacy to the next level. And so, so I really looked for a school where I could do that, and became really active in the schools. There was a constitutional litigation clinic. There was domestic violence work that I was involved in, and just had this wonderful experience in law school. And then from that, I got to a point where I sort of beginning my career and thinking, well, how can I do, what I want to do? How can I be an advocate for others? So I did practice some employment law and discrimination, and realized that litigation was just not for me. It was not for me, not at all. And at that point in my life, I had to kind of pivot and say, what is it I really want to be doing? What am I good at? What am I, what interests me? And so I kind of had to do a rethinking of where I saw myself, because I think in law school, we're the most of us are sort of told that we're supposed to go this traditional route. Everyone goes into a firm, and that's where you're supposed to go. And I think schools are getting better in introducing people to law students to alternative careers, and I think that's fantastic. But it definitely took a lot for me to say, okay, well, what do I want to be doing? And I remember this note that one of the justices of the New Jersey Supreme Court gave to me. I clerked for this justice on the New Jersey Supreme Court after law school. She was fantastic, great experience, and when we finished, she gave me, as a parting gift, she gave me this picture of these flowers that she had taken. And underneath it was inscribed was, "Dear Heidi, always remember to stop and smell the flowers on your life's path."
What?
And that, to me, struck me. It's like I don't think I realized it at the time, but after I sort of did this rethinking of what is it I want to be doing? And I'm like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what she was telling me, to stop and smell the flowers and be present and figure out, like, stop kind of going in that hamster wheel of these are the things you think you want to do, and kind of figure out, what makes the most sense, and what are you passionate about, and what do you really like to do, which kind of sent me through this whole new trajectory of this well-being work, which I absolutely love. I think it's so rewarding. I think when you look at what's happening sort of in our entire society, in terms of workplace well-being. I mean, you look at the US Surgeon General, his priorities are well-being in the workplace. You look at, the mental health of young people, and how it's suffering, and what are we going to do when those people get into the workforce. I mean, it just, to me, it's like the number one priority. It's like the one thing we have to prioritize, or we're not going to have an effective workforce. We're going to have people burning out, and people suffering from suicide, as well as, in addition to other mental health issues.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
that's a long story.
well, I have to say a couple of things. First of all, to my listeners, that was a perfectly done intro story. I'm always talking about, when we're talking about connecting with others and teaching professional development to lawyers, it's about the connection value. And I'm always trying to teach them what I've phrased the personal connection story, like share something that I can connect with. Now, most of the listeners are probably going, but hockey? But listen, didn't you connect with Heidi over that story? Like, you really got a sense for who she is. And she was vulnerable and real. And so maybe some of you would sit there and go, well, I can't share a story similar to that because then people would know that I didn't get to do X, Y, and Z. But you can't overanalyze it. So that was a beautiful story and it made tremendous sense. And the second thing is, what you're really saying, Heidi, is that you spoke up and you had a voice and you shared your voice at a very young age. And I think that is a huge lesson for us to bring to the table for women lawyers and for all people, frankly. But since we're talking to women lawyers today, where is your voice and where is your humanity in your voice? And it was about Heidi and your hockey, right? But it's also about everyone else and how everyone else benefited from her abilities to grow. And then really the fact, I really applaud you, Heidi, for taking it one step further and saying, what do I want to be doing next? And I think that there is a huge lesson, for us all, because I think we get on one trajectory, the hamster wheel, and we're making money and we're paying the bills and we're doing more than just that. But we're never stopping to say, what's next? And where can I bring what my passion is and my purpose and make a difference? Because I don't think it just has to be you and me, Heidi, doing that and advocating for others. It's not that this is just a Heidi and Ketty thing. It's everybody's right and everyone's, um, what's another word for it? Not just you're right, but you do really should, everyone should take that time. What do you think about that?
Well, one comment I have on that, when we think about this hamster wheel that we're on, and thinking also specifically about the legal profession, which is a lot of my focus, which is, we have this culture, that we sort of keep perpetuating, where law students get recruited by big law firms. They go in, they work 24/7, they make a lot of money, they're subsumed by the culture, they become partner, the cycle continues. They're rewarded by long hours. They're rewarded by, maybe spending time away from their family. They're rewarded. They're incentivized, to not take care of themselves, not take vacation. Just recently, we've heard of firms that have that have bonus structures depending upon how many days you actually spend physically in the office,
Right.
which goes to flexibility. And I mean, flexibility is so key to well-being. And so, we look at, again, like some of this culture, and I don't mean to say there are no firms that are doing a good job. I do think that there are a lot of people in, especially the big firms, that are trying to make changes in
Yeah.
these firms. But it's really hard because money is a huge driver, right? Money is a huge driver. And so, whether it's like capitalism, I don't know, or
It
is
is.
it, we
It
really,
is.
I mean,
It is.
yeah, I mean, and that's part of it. And it's like, and I think also part of it is it's generational too. And I've had conversations with people, managing partners at big firms that will say, um, yeah, things will change. It'll change when the next generation becomes leaders. And
True.
that, it may be true. I worry though that if we don't really make changes to the culture now, then people are going to kind of just fall into that. Like, okay, well, that's what was happening before. That's how I have to do things, in order for this to work.
But do you see the trend that I do with the younger lawyers, women lawyers, let's just say, they push back a lot more. I was just talking to one the other day, and she's like, I just refuse to go in the office. I don't
Yep,
need to go in the
love
office. I
it.
need to be in the office. Now, look, I'm not saying everyone needs to be a rebel and, make everyone's life miserable. Um, but people are really voicing their opinions, much like you did about hockey, and saying, hey, let's talk about this. Or maybe they
Yeah.
should be using it to say, let's talk about this rather than just slamming the door shut, because which is what she was doing. She was like, nope, not coming in. And so, perhaps in the flexibility conversation and in generational capitalism, maybe, and you tell me your thoughts on this, we should soften that a little bit for the generation that just refuses to conform and say, okay, let's talk about this, because I agree with you. What I don't want to see is people just throwing up their hands and going, okay, I mean, it's either I show up or I lose my job, and I keep my mouth shut and show up. And, that was one thing that I just never did. I remember back in the 90s at the firm, I was like, you want me to just sit here when I don't have anything to do? Or I could go home and eat dinner and work out and then work again? Like, why would I just sit here? And so I would just get up and leave. And it was like, oh, where are you going? I'm like, I am not going to just sit here. That is stupid, right? I'm tired. I need a break. And that means I'm going home, and then I'll pick it back up, because, the billable hour reflects what you're working on, right? And your work
Right.
product shows it. So there's got to be a middle
Right.
ground, right? I mean, we can't
Right.
keep like this, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think sort of in my conversations with people who, a lot of folks in my generation, and I'm a little bit over 10 years out in my 40s. I have young kids, right? And my peers are people who are now becoming partners at firms. And some of the conversations I've had with them is that, it's a balance of them wanting to do their work and do a really good job with it, and create those boundaries and do what they need to do for themselves. But then there's the other piece, which is, well, I also need to like advocate for everyone else who comes after me, right? And that can be a big burden, I think.
Yeah.
And it's and a little bit scary too, where you kind of sometimes you just want to like put your head down and just do what you need to do, right? And I mean, I can vouch for that as,
Yeah.
as a parent, like with young kids, where it's like that's all my family life is, like all subsuming right? And then I've got a job, and then I've got, on volunteer boards, right? And so sometimes you just feel like, well, I can't, like I can't
I
help everyone. Like I can't, and then you look at like, folks who are, from like certain populations that have been like historically marginalized in the legal profession, and sort of what they're having to do in order to, make sure that that they can develop into their roles, and they have to go like way above and beyond, right? And so, that's, that can be tough too. And so I think it's a balance of sort of needing to do things for yourself, and then also like, how am I going to also add, because we want to, there's a lot of people out there who, want to make changes. Like I'll give you an example of this actually. Um, I worked for our lawyer assistance program before I became into this role, our lawyer assistance program in Massachusetts. And one of the things I started there was we called it Super Mom, and it was a group for lawyer moms, and we actually all had kids like around the same age, and there were a lot of sharing stories of, oh my gosh, this happened to me, this was not good, this was terrible, or like this person treated me this way, or this person would ask me like, why am I leaving at this time, or I'd come back into the office like on a Tuesday because I didn't need to be there on a Monday, and they'd say like, oh, did you have a great vacation? And so, and people would share all these things, and but then they'd also feel like this huge burden, like they knew other people were experiencing these things and they wanted to make changes for them too, but at the same time they were like, but I just need to get through the day. Like I just
Right.
need to get through the day myself. So there's that tension too, I think, particularly like in folks in my generation that like really want to do good, they want to make changes, yet they're so in it. They're so in it, and they're in that hamster wheel. So it's really tough.
So what do you recommend for the women lawyers who are listening going, yeah, it's tough and I do want to do that. And one recommendation is what you said about boundaries and self-care. But then how do you expand your vision and say, okay, I'm going to stop focusing on the billable hour and whether the kids were picked up from daycare and dropped off and what did I forget about the play and the cookies having to be baked and all that. And how can I put my focus on helping others? And by the way, how does this all tie into
Yeah.
well-being? There is a tie-in for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Answer that first,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
the second part.
I think it's all about, well, I mean, I think this is all about well-being. We're talking about our own well-being, we're talking about other people's well-being, and we're talking about creating a better work culture, which I think all comes under the umbrella of well-being. Um, I think there's a few things. I mean, the way that I always talk about like the work that we're doing around well-being is in two parts. One is the individual, so like individual actions, things that you need to do for yourself, and then the other part is the organizational or structural, sort of the things that are outside that we need to kind of push on, right, to make change. And the individual part is really important. And for many years, I think in terms of this well-being movement, we really focused on that individual part. We've said, here's things you can do, like creating boundaries. Here's things you need to do for yourself. Eating well, right? Like not drinking very much alcohol, like that, those types of things. Like, and we focused a lot on that. And so we're now kind of moving to this place where, okay, well, those are good things, but unfortunately, there's actually some like structural things that need to happen as well, which I think is part of what we started to talk about. But in terms of like individual things, like actually heard this really great talk by Larry Krieger, who I'm sure you know who Larry is, who is I'm pretty sure he's a psychologist. I'm going to get all this wrong, but and he's written a bunch of books. He did a seminal study in 2015 on lawyer happiness, what makes lawyers happy, and the focus was really on like autonomy, and sort of mastery, and the ability to have a growth mindset, right? And so he gave this talk a couple years ago that I heard, and he talked about dropping stress completely, like just getting rid of it. Like there's no like stress is just like is fear plus a challenge. And if we can just look at things as a challenge, okay, how are we going to react to this challenge rather than like having this like fear-based reaction to
Yeah.
it immediately, right? So how do we react to things? And I think like how we react to things is really important because it impacts the way that we treat others, right? And we think about, right, like we think about how important, in this movement, we talk about compassion and we talk about empathy. And I hear this in like the courts all the time in terms of the way that judges treat lawyers in the courtroom, and court staff treat lawyers in the courtroom and treat litigants, and how that can have a huge impact. How managers treat the people that they're supervising, right, has a huge impact on their well-being, on the people that they're supervising. We hear so many stories of like people, lawyers being bullied by other lawyers, particularly women, right? Being bullied.
I mean, I have a story of a very good friend of mine who's very, very high up the food chain, very, very high up the food chain at a AmLaw 50. And she personally shares stories of being bullied by lower level women lawyers who are jealous, right? So,
Hmm,
yeah, it's
hmm.
a real
Yeah,
thing. And how do we address that? And now you're talking
right.
my language around the stress component. But what you're really talking about is the self-awareness that we all
Yep.
need to bring to our
Yes.
practice, into our lives. It's running so fast and so hard, though. How do you do it? How do you personally do it?
Well, I mean, I think um, there's two tangible, um, things I would suggest. One is I think um, having support, like having supportive community or, family, or maybe it's I hear people talking about like their personal board of directors, right? Having people that you can go to talk about these things that happened. If you're bullied, if you're struggling with something, right? Have this community, and maybe it's different communities kind of depending upon your life, but having people that you can go to and you can seek out, not necessarily. I see that like a little bit different than mentorship, honestly. I see it more of just like, could be peer support, right? People, and there's not going to be one person who's going to be able to like help you with, every single issue. But like in my life, like I know that there's certain people I can kind of call on if I'm experiencing something, right? If I'm struggling, like I'm having trouble with some sort of collaboration I'm having uh, with with someone else, and I can kind of go to someone and say, how do you think I should navigate this, right? um, I think that's really helpful.
That's really important, because you actually trust that you're not alone in this world and there's other people that
Right.
will be supportive and will give you honest feedback and will not make fun, quote unquote, of your problem.
Right.
These are all thoughts that, as I coach lawyers, are like, I can't ask for help. I can't tell anybody.
Right.
I'm super lawyer, right? And I can handle it all, right? And so
Yep.
it's about the humility and faith, right? Is what I really hear you saying, that there will be
Yep.
people out there to support you and that the universe supports us. Maybe you've all heard that, now it's become cliche, but Gabby Bernstein's book became really popular because it resonates, right? That we're
Yeah.
not all alone and we don't have to figure it all out by ourselves. And women
Yep.
lawyers don't have to compete with one another. And I mean, those stories
Right.
are really sad. So what's the second thing you do?
Yeah.
Support is the first one.
Well, I actually was going to move over to mentorship. I was going to kind of pair the two, because I think, yeah, I mean, I think having mentors that you can seek out, in a different way, that can really like guide you. And I've had some fantastic mentors throughout our career, but like people who like will also really champion you, I think are really important. I mean, I guess maybe that's more like a sponsor, but people who will really have your back, and support you and what you're doing. So I think those two things, kind of having that ability to talk to people, to kind of work things through, and then other people who can really sort of champion what you're doing.
I love what you're saying about mentorship. And I want to raise a point because I'm going to guess people listening are going, well, I don't want a canned mentor, right? If you're from a law firm and listening to this, please don't try to set up a formal mentorship program. And the reason I say this is I get that request a lot. And I always say you don't need a formal mentorship program. What you need is a bunch of employees, lawyers, women lawyers, whatever, who are really confident who they are and will be willing to ask for mentorship support and will be willing to offer that. But when we're all a bunch of broken, overworked, tired lawyers in a firm, no one has the capacity or the energy or the wherewithal to give that. So I would guess what you're doing, and I'm sure of it, is you're asking for that mentorship. I know the beautiful mentors that I have, and I have two who are actually very well known mentors. And I just went up to them and I said, hey, could you do this with me? And it's been like 2 decades now that they've been mentoring me. And all because I asked, and I don't ask for much, but they have been showing up over and over again. But it took me saying, I like what you're doing, and are you willing? And they had the capacity and they had the self confidence. So I think that's the only addition I would make to that, which I'm guessing
Yeah.
you know that to be true anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it takes time. You think about being, I think when I was right out of law school and kind navigating, my career and learning so much, right? It's hard to have that confidence right away, which makes it even more helpful to have mentors who you trust, and can uh, and can provide you with that support and help you build that confidence, because it's so important.
Love it, love it. And stress and self-confidence in my world at least go together according to my formal research. So as our stressors go up, then our
Mhm.
self-confidence drops proportionally according to what I researched and found out. And so then we're not going to speak up and ask for help. So which came first, chicken or the egg? I
That
think
makes
if we can
sense.
get our stress down, then we can get our self-confidence up. And it is what you said, how we react to things. Those are the stressors impact how we treat others. So nothing else, I hope what people take away from this first part of our conversation is maybe get your stressors down, figure it out. Because look, we did it and we're okay. You can do it too. We're just the only two examples of women. There's plenty of us out there, but that you see who made a shift, who changed practice areas, who devoted ourselves to something different, something bigger than the everyday, which is extraordinary too. We need noble lawyers doing the good work, but that's what I'm sure you figured that out too. I was like,
Yeah.
there's other securities lawyers can do this as good as me, if
Right.
not better than me, but I don't see very many people signing up for what I want to do, so I'm going to do that, right? And
Right.
it's just that easy. And I know you did the same thing. So
Yeah, just one quick comment on that. I think, yeah, I think prioritizing, right? Like what's most important to you in life, like not to get too philosophical.
no,
But
it's
I mean, I'm at a point in my life where like I actually have a very close friend who is dying from cancer right now. And it really puts things in perspective for me, like what is really important in this life, and is it working 24/7? Like what you just said, there are other securities lawyers that can do this, right? What are the things that I want to prioritize in my life, and sort of making decisions like that? Do I need to, how much more time do I need to spend on this project? Does it have to be 100, do I have to give 110% every single time? No, I don't. And that's kind of where I've come out, which is like, I think part of it is, it has to do with confidence. Like when you feel like you're at a point in your life where you do feel confident about your career and what you've accomplished, that you can kind of move forward, not in a there's this word like quiet quitting. It's not like I'm just sailing through, right? Like I'm working my butt off, right? But I'm not doing it in a way that I'm going to burn out. I'm taking breaks, and again, like kind of coming back to what is really important, and can I just put this aside? It might not get done. It might not get done. Maybe I don't meet the deadline. That might be okay.
Oh,
Right?
it's so well said. The word that comes up to me when you're saying all that is grace. Just
Yeah.
doing it and doing the best you
Yep.
can, leaving
Yep.
perfection behind. This need
Right.
that we have, the personalities. We've all talked about this, right? That
Mm-hmm.
has to be 110% like you said. And I kind of really did give that up. I'm a reformed perfectionist. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
to the point where I used to walk by, and if the cushion on the couch was a little crooked, I would straighten that up too. And I have just trained myself, and so it's doable, right? And there's a lot of grace with giving ourselves that ability to prioritize. You just said it so well, and I hope people listen to that and just reflect on it. Make a list, audience, of what's your number one priority. And there's a good book, if you guys haven't read this book. Gary Keller, who runs Keller Williams Realty, The One Thing. That's his thing. Yeah, Heidi's giving me a thumbs up. If you haven't read that book, like, he's all about
Yeah.
what's the one thing you could do today and put your goal in there to make
Mm-hmm.
$1 million within the next 6 months. That if you did that one thing, everything else would become either easier or not necessary. So
Mm-hmm.
shout out to Gary Keller, because that's a good way of prioritizing. And I'm sorry about your friend with breast cancer. As a breast cancer survivor, I
It
can
is.
tell
Yeah.
you, nothing put my life more in perspective. I thought being an immigrant did. I
Mm-hmm.
thought COVID did. I thought my mom passing away did. But having breast
Yeah.
cancer put my life in perspective. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
gift, even though it sounds like I'm saying that on the back end, but I'm really not. So hopefully no
Yeah.
one has to encounter that. But
Wow.
stop and look at
Yeah.
your life without that,
Mm-hmm.
and like you have breast cancer, but just stop and evaluate
Yeah.
it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm sending her healing wishes. So
Thank
let's
you.
go to part two. You're welcome. What's going on with you? What's one item on your mind that we can brainstorm, or I can coach you through? Because everyone learns from what you're working through, and we can work through it
Mm-hmm.
together as a community.
So this is one that I think about a lot in relation to the work that I do every single day. Which is that, so people who are doing work in the well-being space, it's a hard space to measure progress. Right?
Sure.
Very hard space to measure progress. And um in so for example, in my work in Massachusetts, we have this report that was published in 2019, and it has a number of different recommendations kind of based off the National Task Force report on lawyer well-being that was drafted in 2017. And so part of my job is to really work through those recommendations, figure out how to implement these things. Some are, macro level, like culture change, right? Some are a lot smaller and more tangible. But a lot of times when I go out there and I talk to people and I raise awareness, right? And people are always saying, okay, but like, why are things not happening? Like, what, this is not changing. I'm still having this experience. Like, I'm still
Yeah.
working 24/7. I feel burned out every day, and people are treating me terribly in litigation. And to me, like, I tell myself, okay, this is incremental, right? Our work is incremental, and you can't see
Yeah.
change overnight. But I also think that, like, it sometimes it can be hard then to, like, continue to motivate people to do this work, right? Because you don't see it overnight. And certainly there's lots of people who are so passionate about this, and they will keep doing it. But it's challenging every single day, and even those people are becoming burned out because they're spinning their wheels, or they're will do things. I mean, we've done tons of things in Massachusetts, and certainly we anecdotally, and we try to do evaluation, and I can point to things. Yeah, we've done X, Y, and Z, and we've made this progress, and this progress, you know but but um but certainly, there are still issues, right? There's still issues. I mean, we
There
live in a
always will
world
be.
where there are always going to be issues, and
Yeah,
that's how I try to see it, right? Is that like we're constantly adapting to the next challenge. Let's move forward what we can move forward. And I always say to people, like, I wouldn't be doing this if I weren't optimistic. But at the same time, it's not like I'm lying about that, but like I know there's always going to be challenges, right? So that's kind of what's going on in my head.
so the question is,
That's the question.
how do you
How
reconcile
do
that with what people see out
Yeah, how do you reconcile it, and how do you when you're having those types of you're having that sort of mindset, how do you then motivate people to do the work? How do you continue to motivate people to sort of move forward and come to this work and engage, and help make change?
I love it. It's a great question. So in my coaching work, I always reframe things for clients, right? Just
Mm,
reframing
mm,
things constantly and reframing it back to basics, right?
hmm.
So it's one part, I wouldn't be doing this work if I wasn't seeing results, right? That's how I look at it.
Yeah,
And if not us, then who? Right? Movement building. That's really my forte, but I
yeah,
want it to be everyone's forte. That movements come from, well, what I call the emotional resonance factor. So going back to basics and reframing it is I emotionally resonate when I'm working with this content, and people that emotionally resonate move their audiences into action. Now, often lawyers come to me and go, well, yeah, I want to get new clients. So teach me that emotional resonance factor so clients will just come to me like a magnet. But what I really love to use emotional resonance factor for is what you're talking about, the greater scope of things, the fact that let's take it back to basics. Are you happy doing what you're doing? Say
mm,
I say I do all this work and all the well-being people do all this work and we never make a change. Are you happy right now? Will you be happy then? And
right.
it takes a lot to get lawyers to stop and say, is that target their emotions really, right? And so that's the basic premise. What would make you happy? And
Hmm.
then let's
Hmm.
start working towards that. Forget what's happening in the bigger picture. What can you do? The lawyer that comes to you and says they're still picking on me, they're doing that, they come to me and say that too. And I always tell them this, Heidi: you can't control other people's behavior. The only person's behavior you can control is yourself. And if you're going to wait for me and Heidi to build this movement out and make it happen, you may be waiting a long time. And that's a lot of burden to put on us. And we're doing the best we can and blah, blah, blah. But what can you do to control the internal locus of
Hmm.
control is what it's called, to set yourself up for success? You are not a
Hmm.
victim in that situation. You have skills and abilities, you have a mind, you have emotions. And what are the little things? And maybe the little things are really big things. So
Hmm.
that's what I generally have, that conversation, and shift the control mechanism back to the internal locus of control so that people don't feel that, for instance, suicide then is the only valid option because
Right.
they can't control their environment. And it's
Hmm.
not easy in law. You and I both know that, right?
Right.
Well-being takes a huge hit because we feel like it's out of my control. All I can do is sit here and bill. And I hear that across professions. So I would say reframe it for yourself and say, am I happy doing the work that I'm doing? And maybe that sounds like a very selfish thing to look at. However, I think if we're not being selfish, then we can't really be foundationally sound to go out and serve. So that's what I always look at. Am I
Yeah.
happy doing this? Do I sleep well at night? I'm sure you hear this too. Lawyers often tell me they don't sleep. And it's a factor that I take
Yeah.
in when I'm doing my intake. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
so that's a symptom, right? Of not
Right.
feeling like you're where you're supposed to be, that you're serving a purpose. These worries, the churning thoughts, are because there isn't that underlying happiness or joy in your life. And it
Right.
might sound Pollyanna, but I think Pollyanna died a very happy woman. So At the end of the day, gives a you know what otherwise. So reframe it for
Yeah.
yourself and reframe it for others and be selfish and allow others around you to be selfish and go back to basics. I think with these conversations, I
Yeah.
think the millennials really identify with the basics, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
lawyers that work for 3 months as a contract lawyer, then go and live in Costa Rica and surf and then come back and work for another 3 months. I just, those people call
Sounds
me,
great.
right?
Sounds great.
There
Yep.
have
I
to
love
be.
it.
So does that help?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting sort of in the context of my work. It's almost like it's almost a little bit meta in terms of thinking like what, what am I happy doing what I'm doing, which is trying to make sure other people are happy, right? That's right. That's sort of that's what I'm doing. And certainly, I mean, and I think and this is something that I had to think a lot about sort of when I was after I had practiced and trying to figure out what I was going to do next was like, what are the things I like to do on a daily basis, right? And so the work that I'm doing right now feels really great in that sense because I get to do a lot of the things I really like to do, and especially with my job at the Supreme Judicial Court Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing. I basically got to go in there and treat it as a as an entrepreneur and as a new organization, sort of build this thing from the ground up and manage all those different components, and that's what I love about it. I mean, that's what I absolutely love. And then trying to figure out, how do we get this stuff done? How do we get this stuff done? And so, if I go back and think about it like that, yeah, I love it.
And you
Yes.
light up
And,
when you say that. You
right,
do.
right, right, right.
And
And I
that,
know we're doing things. I know we're doing things. It's just we get, you get the questions a lot. Because there's still a lot of people struggling.
yeah. And the great leaders kept the faith just like that. Martin Luther King,
Mm,
Gandhi, um, they might, I guess deep down, everyone in their own soul, thanks for being vulnerable, thinks that. I think that.
yeah,
However, every time there's a lawyer that chooses suicide as an option, I'm like, oh man, we're late. We missed the mark or something.
right, right.
However, there's always the other ones that show up with a smile on their face and saying, I listened to what so and so said, or thanks for saying this. And we're
Yeah.
not looking for platitudes or gratitudes, right? We're just looking for feedback. And so it's there. We just have to do what makes us happy so we resonate that. I have a slide when I do my keynotes or trainings. How do you sell happiness? Do you resonate happiness at some level for yourself? And oftentimes, like lawyers who are litigants or litigators or divorce lawyers are like, oh, we don't have that happiness thing going on here. I'm like, well, at some level you got to, because that's the vibe you carry forward and what people pick up, right? Going back to the hippie era of the 70s. But it's true, like you just lit up when you were talking about that. And so it's a great place to start. The
Mhm.
fundamental, the basics, the foundations are never wrong. You make them stronger, and then you show up and you lead with that, right? You just show up happier and people are
Mhm.
like, what are you doing differently? And you're like, here's what I'm doing. Here's what
Right.
I'm doing. And it's working for me. It can work for you, your version of it, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Heidi, I could talk to you
Absolutely.
forever and ever and ever. We could talk about a million topics that would all be relevant to this audience, but I
Yep.
know we have to go to save the world in other ways.
Or we'll try.
So if people
At
wanted to
least we'll
get a
try.
hold of you, Heidi, where would they find you? How could they learn
Sure.
more about what you're up to? Whatever
Yeah,
access.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have two websites that I would love to share, and my contact information is on both of them. But the Massachusetts SJC Standing Committee on Lawyer Wellbeing has a website. It is lawyerwellbeingma.org, and that provides lots of information about the different resources and programs, and not only specific to Massachusetts. We have actually some great guides for law schools and law students and faculty and administrators, how to support well-being, among other things. And then also the Institute for Wellbeing in Law website, which is iwill.net. So you can find lots of information about how IWIL is sort of leading the national movement towards well-being through advocacy and education and scholarship and programming. And we do have an upcoming, I think I would be remiss if I did not say something about our upcoming conference in January, and will be 3 days and lots of great information about well-being in the workplace. So thank you.
Wonderful. And all that will go in the show notes. If you guys are looking for that, I will put those in the show notes. And yes, January 2024, will be hosting another virtual conference. So show up and learn and be part of the process. And Heidi, thank you for your time. You were so busy. Really appreciate what you're doing out there beyond words. Truly, it takes people like you. But look, it takes everyone. And
Yep.
so you're doing your part, I'm doing my part, and everyone's doing their part. And we're all going to get there together because we all have time and patience on our side. So thank you again. And to my audience, thanks for listening. Hope you got what you needed out of this. Take a nugget, implement it, make a difference for yourself. Be patient and kind to yourself, and know you are on the right path because you are self-aware and doing your very best. And until next time, Keti G.